I was talking to a friend who just landed a gig shooting a short documentary in a cramped indoor venue, and she was sweating over whether to rent a gimbal or just wing it with a handheld rig. She's got a full-frame mirrorless body, a couple of fast lenses, and a tight deadline. So the decision feels a lot like a gamble: spend a few hundred on a piece of gear that might not live up to the hype, or risk shaky footage that could cost her the client. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been digging through forums, watching demo reels, and reading the specs for the DJI RS4 Pro combo. So let's break down what matters before you decide to click Add to Cart. First off, the biggest question most people ask about a high-end gimbal is, will it actually hold my camera? The RS4 Pro advertises a 4.5 kilograms, 10 pounds, payload capacity, which is a noticeable bump over the previous generation. In plain English, that means you can mount a DSLR with a decent telephoto lens, or even a cinema-grade mirrorless with a small rig, without the motors whining or the balance drifting after a few minutes of use. For anyone who's already carrying a heavy lens stack, that extra torque translates into smoother pans and less motor strain, especially when you're tracking a subject that's moving quickly across a low-light stage. Speaking of low light, the LiDAR focusing system is a game-changer if you often shoot in dim environments. Traditional contrast detect autofocus can hunt forever when the scene is underexposed, but the LiDAR sensor projects a tiny laser pattern and measures distance directly, giving the gimbal a reliable depth map regardless of how much ambient light there is. In practice, I've seen it lock focus on a candlelit dinner table within a second, keeping the subject crisp while the rig stays perfectly level. If your workflow relies on pulling clean focus pulls in venues like restaurants, churches, or night markets, that reliability can save you a lot of post-production time. One of the features that gets a lot of buzz is the native vertical shooting mode. Instead of rotating the camera on a separate plate or using a third-party adapter, you flip the camera on the gimbal itself and the motors reorient to keep the stabilization axis aligned. That's handy for portrait-oriented social media content or for photographers who need to switch between landscape and portrait quickly during an event. The transition is almost instantaneous, just a press of the joystick mode switch, so you don't have to pause and rebalance the rig. It's the kind of small convenience that feels like a big win once you've been in the middle of a crowded shoot and need to pivot fast. Now, let's talk about the control side of things. The RS4 Pro comes with a dedicated remote that supports dual focus and zoom motor control. If you pair it with lenses that have built-in focus or zoom motors, you can adjust those parameters from the gimbal's joystick without touching the camera body. The real advantage shows up in run-and-gun scenarios where you're moving through a space and need to keep your hands on the rig. For example, a documentary filmmaker can smoothly zoom in on a speaker while walking backward, all while the gimbal compensates for the motion. That level of integration reduces the need for a second operator or a separate follow-focus system. Battery life is another practical concern that often trips people up. The standard RS4 battery gives you about 8 hours of operation, which is respectable, but the combo includes the BG30 battery grip that pushes the runtime up to 29 hours when you attach the extra pack. In real-world terms, you could run an entire day of shooting, a few breaks, and still have charge left for a late-night brawl session without swapping batteries. That's especially valuable for location shoots where power outlets are scarce and you don't want to carry a charger that adds extra weight. On the flip side, the added capability does bring some trade-offs. The RS4 Pro weighs roughly 3 kilograms on its own, and with the BG30 grip and a full battery pack, you're looking at a rig that's close to 4 kilograms. It's not a backpack-light piece of gear you can toss in a small bag and forget about. If you're a hobbyist who primarily shoots on a tripod or does occasional handheld work, that heft might feel overkill, and you could end up spending more time managing the rig than actually filming. The learning curve is also steeper than with entry-level stabilizers. The menu system, while comprehensive, can feel a bit dense at first. There are multiple focus modes, custom axis settings, and transmission options that you'll need to configure before you get smooth footage. I recommend spending a solid afternoon in a controlled environment just to dial in the balance, test the focus motor response, and get comfortable with the joystick layout before you head out on a paid shoot. You should really consider the RS4 Pro. If you're a working creator, think indie filmmakers, commercial videographers, or event shooters who regularly uses a DSLR or mirrorless with lenses in the 2 kilograms to 4 kilograms.